All cells were ultimately born from one cell. A single organism, alone on planet Earth, perhaps alone in the universe. About 4 billion years ago, one became two, two became four, then 8, 16, 32. The rhythm of the dividing pair.
Okay, ready, go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies and specifically talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 232. And the movie this week is 2018's Annihilation. And here to talk with me about it, he had seen it and I had not. It's Josh Munro. Josh, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm pretty good. Been a while, but has it been a year? Because I think was it during your Nicolas Cage August that I was on last year?
I think so, yeah. It's been about a year.
Maybe I've been on once since. I don't remember.
It's been a little while. It's been long enough that that I felt like we had to get you back on. You know, you're one of the OGs. You were on a lot of episodes early on. And we started talking and you brought up Annihilation and I was like, ooh, perfect. I haven't seen it. And it's one of those, this is one that has been on my list of like, I keep hearing that I need to see it. And it was one that just like floated past me. Like I heard about it coming out. I saw Natalie Portman, Annihilation. I knew nothing else about it, and I didn't get out to see it. And then it just sort of went out of sight, out of mind. And then I'd hear about it every once in a while. I'd make lists of sci-fi movies or horror movies, or somebody would bring it up. And so finally getting a chance to see it was great, and check that off my list. But what's your history with it? Did you see it? Were you there opening night, or like what's your history with Annihilation?
I mean, so I'm sure you did your research, so you'll go into some of this already when we talk about it. But so I had originally seen an article about the book that the movie was based off of, and I was like, that sounds interesting. And on a whim, I had like listened to the first audiobook, but I had purchased all three of them. I got into the second book and I kind of tapped out. I was like, I'm okay, this is not, but I got the gist of the first book. I was like, this is interesting. It'll be curious to see how they go to screen with this. But enough time had passed that when I saw the movie, which was in theaters, I don't know if it wasn't opening day. It might've been in the first week or two, but it was definitely have an edible and go see this movie and completely blow my mind. So I really enjoyed it the first viewing and thought, wow, this is just an experience. And then have since, I don't remember if I saw it more than once in the theater. I might have seen it by myself and then taken my friend Matt to see it with me. But I've watched it over the years. It has become like every 6 to 9 months, when the monotony of life kind of settles in and you just need to shake things off because you're feeling kind of, cabin fever, closet, like trapped inside, whatever. Like I'd throw this on, like if I was feeling kind of moody or depressed. And when I got done with it, it would just be like, it would be like the Etch-a-Sketch in my brain was shaking. I'm like, okay, let's move on with something else. Like, I don't know. It was like a good reset for me.
Yeah. Okay. So, I can see that. Just
well,
to warn everybody, quick to warn everybody listening to this episode, we're going to spoil the hell out of the movie because we're going to dive into it quite a bit. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to know anything and you want to go into it with a first viewing like I did, pause here, go watch it. It's on Netflix. It'll be there for the rest of September. And it's probably on a few other streaming services, but it's an hour and 55 minutes and it's absolutely worth it. And then come back and listen to us talk about it. But all right, now continue.
I would say my non-spoilery tease. This is like if I was going to do a video series, I would always start like a review with, here's my TLDR before, like, if you don't want to care about watch it, I'll give you everything you need. But if you want to watch it, this is what I'm saying, go into it with. It's a science fiction. It has horror elements. It has intense moments. There's definitely some gore. So if you're, I feel like squeamish is like a diminishing word. Like I don't want to say like if you're sensitive to like blood and it's effective. It's visceral. It's not like blood splatter all over the place. I feel like everything in this movie is it's executed very intentionally, and
Hmm.
there's just enough of everything to get you to a point. So, but that might be too much for some people. But
Yeah,
it's an
and
interesting.
I would
Oh, go ahead.
say in the topic of gore, it's very grotesque imagery.
Yeah.
There are like animal attacks and that kind of gore.
Hmm.
It's not gore like a slasher film type gore. I wouldn't call it,
Right.
but it's very affecting, and it's very visceral is the perfect word for it, because it is
Yeah.
very much that. So if you are sensitive to it, that's a good thing to bring up. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I do like that it it avoids horror movie tropes of
Hmm.
it doesn't there's very little time between you get a hint of something might happen and something happens, and then they don't like keep it in the shadows and hide it from you to build suspense. Like once something has been revealed, it is on the screen and they are all dealing with it in like actual time, and you're part of it with them. So it's not like there's not so much jump scares and like this like it's all of the fear, all of the wonder, all of the curiosity sits with you throughout the entire movie. It's not so much that you get like builds up and reliefs. It's like kind of ever present, and there's just like slight increases of intensity, and then it kind of keeps.
Hmm.
It's worth seeing. Yeah, it's worth
Oh,
seeing, but it may not be
very
for
much.
everybody. Yeah.
It's very cosmic horror in its horror aspects,
Yeah.
I think. Um,
Yeah.
otherworldly, and we're going to dive into that quite a bit more, but it's definitely more that end than kind of traditional horror that you think of in movies. So that's something to think about. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, non-spoiler review, I'll just come right out and say I had a great time with this. I loved this movie. This was really well done, and I've seen so is written for the screen and directed by Alex Garland, based on a
Hmm.
novel by what was his name, Jeff Vandermeer.
Jeff Vandermeer. I keep wanting to say
And
Vanderbeek. It's not Vanderbeek.
no, but Vanderbeek sounds right. So I have not read the
Yeah,
novel.
Dawson
However,
wrote a book. No.
I haven't read the novel. However, it's now I have a hold on it for the ebook at my library to check out, because I'm very interested. But Alex Garland for me is somebody that I like his
Mm,
work a lot. Um,
yeah.
he has been a novelist and a screenwriter as far back as The Beach. He wrote that
Mm.
novel and then wrote the screenplay that Danny Boyle directed, and I really liked
You and I
that.
have talked about Danny Boyle before.
Yes, we have. Train Spotting was the last time you were on, I think. In fact,
Oh yeah, yeah.
um,
Or a T2. Was it? Yeah.
we did the first one. We did the first one. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But like he
Oh,
wrote
okay.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
He wrote
Anyway.
28 Days Later. Was Alex Garland
Mm.
wrote that one? He wrote Sunshine, which I really like.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
Um,
We
he
can't
wrote
do
the
that on this
screenplay
podcast
for
because we've seen it.
yeah. He wrote the screenplay for Dread,
These Bluetooth
which
earbuds, there's a slight delay. Sorry.
no worries. Dread is a great one. He wrote that screenplay. Um, and then he finally got into directing in 2014 with Ex Machina, which sadly is still on my list of things I need to see because I keep hearing so much about it.
Oh, so I was going to say, if you have seen Ex Machina, you have an idea of what Alex Garland can do with a script, but also Oscar Isaac is in both. There's actually two people from Ex Machina that are in this, but yeah, Oscar Isaac, totally different performance in this movie, but they're both good movies.
Apparently, Oscar Isaac was making The Last Jedi concurrently with this movie. Like he was filming both at the same time, and they were on. He basically,
Oh,
according
really?
to the trivia, he had a trailer that was between the two sets. And so he would just work on both movies at the same time, which is crazy to think about, first of all. Like, because there's nothing lacking from either
Yeah,
performance either. Granted, this is a very understated performance, but
there's not as
just to
much of him in it.
Right. But just to do two projects like
But
that at
it's
once is
subtle.
kind of
It's
crazy. Mhm.
yeah, especially where his character. Like I almost was gonna say like, oh, it's like he's playing two different people, but it's not. It's just that it's almost like every time we see his character on screen, we're either directly seeing him reacting to Natalie Portman or we're seeing her memories of him. So you're getting like broad snippets of his range. And then like when he's
Yeah.
actually in the room with her, it's very toned down and very minimal, subtle, reactionary. So it's yeah, I mean, I can imagine you can't just jump in like, all right, I'm ready to shoot. Like you got to get into that place. You gotta,
Yeah, well, and especially those flashback scenes were what I loved about that. So I had a note as I was taking this that was it was the first flashback scene to them laying in the bed together talking when she starts poking fun at him about, oh, I stand out in the garden and look up at the sky. You
pining
know,
at the
she's just like,
moon.
yeah. And my note on that was I
Yeah,
like this scene as a way to really show their relationship and how good of a relationship the
yeah,
two of them have. And then the movie over time slowly reveals more and more that that relationship wasn't as good as they were making it
yeah,
seem at the beginning.
yeah,
And I really loved the way that that went down because it's the trope of like I've lost my husband, you know, he disappeared, uh, and at first I'm thinking, okay, he's definitely dead, and then it's sort of you get the idea, oh no, he's been gone for a year, but
hmm
like no official record of it,
yeah.
and
And she's made inquiries and hasn't heard anything. And yeah,
yeah, and then you know she's remembering him and remembering the good times that they had and all that, and I thought that was really cool way to do that, and I felt okay, all right, I know where we're going with this, and then they start showing the flashbacks of her having the affair with her coworker, and I'm
yeah,
like, oh, all right, so she went to him for some comfort after her husband disappears, presumed dead. Well, then that turns out, oh no, she was going for comfort well before Oscar Isaac disappeared. Like it's just the way that that whole dynamic was revealed was very
yeah,
interesting to me.
yeah. And even so, you've seen it once.
Mhm.
So when you get around to seeing it a second time, which I have a strong feeling you probably will throw it on again at some point, because it definitely builds on itself upon reviewings. Like notably, there's right in the beginning of the movie interaction between Natalie Portman and her coworker about what are you doing this weekend, and she
Yep.
says, "Oh, I'm painting our bed. I'm painting the bedroom."
Yep.
Which you're like, okay, you get the idea. Her husband's gone. He's been gone for a year. We're talking about it. But then you realize later on in the movie, this is the guy that she has slept with. So is she saying our bedroom or our bedroom? Like whose bedroom?
Yeah.
So it's you start to like see how the initial viewing of it pieces one story together, but then you fill in little things here and there. And also, even watching it multiple times over the years, I'm not 100% sure on the timeline of some of the flashbacks and how they are intended to be ordered. So there's some vague like up to the viewer stuff there.
Yeah. Which I dig. I really like that they were vague with the timelines. At first, it was a little bit jarring. The first time, I'm like, wait, where does this? And then I sort of fell into
Yeah.
like, okay, so we don't know. We're not being given exact amounts of time here,
Yeah. It's
including
disorienting.
like it is disorienting because, you know, we get that opening scene and then we get the shot of the comet and you're
Hmm.
led to sort of believe that like things happened right after this comet hit. Well, no, it's been there for 3 years. That was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so like little things like that, I think you're right. There's ways to there's more story to piece together on further viewings, which I like a lot. Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, Alex Garland's done that with his writing in the past. This is the first directed film of his that I've seen, but his writing, again, The
Hmm.
Beach, 28 Days Later, those are ones that when I watch them again, I find the story more and more. So makes perfect sense that it would happen here. Um, and but yeah, I really like Alex Garland. I want to see Ex Machina, and I want to see his one that came out this year, Men. But Men also looks super disturbing from the trailer that I saw. I was like, man, I want to watch that,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I want to watch that by myself type of movie. Like I just
I
feel like
haven't. Yeah. I haven't seen Men. When it was coming out, it was right when it was like post Hereditary, when A24 was really like kind of going off. And so it's like, oh, Alex Garland, and I like Rory Kinnear. And then I see the trailer and I'm like, this looks like it might be taking the premise way too far that it's setting out to. And I've heard some mixed reviews on it, but I still haven't ventured to see it myself. I don't know. I think I had heard that there's not much there to go for other than like the experience of it. But then that's kind of like why I like watching Annihilation. I like the experience of it. So
Yeah.
maybe it's, yeah.
I'm going to see that at some point too. And I wouldn't mind, when I get some
Yeah.
time at some point to watch Devs as well, because I know that's his series and I hear really good things about Devs.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also, did he do Never Let Me Go?
I don't see
That was a
that on
Carey
his
Mulligan
list.
movie. It's on, why do I feel like,
Oh yeah, no, he wrote the screenplay for that. Yeah.
okay, yeah. Oh, because when I was doing a little bit of research earlier, I mean, I've seen the movie plenty, but I wanted to like remind myself of what was and wasn't in the book. And so you haven't read the book, so I'll try to avoid book stuff, because you should just experience that as it is. But there's some big changes that were made to the book for the movie that some people who are really, really close to the book have issue with. I feel like the changes he made were good for making it a viewable experience and fit this nicely.
Mm.
Also think it takes all the good stuff out of the book and it puts it in this easy to swallow package where everything, the book kind of just goes all over the place sometimes. So
I've heard,
yeah.
I did read that the book, they made some changes. In fact, I saw a couple of snippets of an interview that had Alex Garland and Jeff Vandermeer. And
Mhm.
Vandermeer even saying in that interview, like, I didn't want somebody that was just going to take my book and make a movie out of it. I wanted something new and something that would surprise me. And I thought that was kind of a cool, like, you don't hear an author usually say that. They're usually very precious about their book.
Yeah.
And here's this guy's like, no, I wanted kind of the basic bones of this and then take it and do something with it, because film
Yeah.
and print are very different mediums. And so you can't tell the story the
Mhm.
same in both places. And I thought that was kind of a neat take, but yeah, just Garland's got some kind of way with him where experience is a good way to put it. He is kind of, I almost want to put him, it feels wrong to say this from like I went to film school type perspective, but I want to put him not necessarily in the same echelon as somebody like a David Lynch, but in that same style where like Lynch movies are an experience to watch.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's Garland is in that same general direction, where
Yeah.
he
He creates
really,
more of an atmosphere than like a visual style like a Wes Anderson. Like you're in a Wes Anderson movie because you see what's on the screen. Like
yep,
you've seen an Alex Garland movie because you know where it took you, like emotionally. Like I think his signature is more abstract in that sense, but it's there. It's him.
yes,
I think Lynch is the
yeah.
same way. It's a similar, yeah.
Phil in the chat mentions he's a high concept filmmaker. That's what I was going for. Thank you, Phil. You kind of
Yeah.
gave me the
Yeah.
words that I was looking for. That high concept, and I
Yeah.
love high concept sci-fi stories. I'm all
Mm.
about like just bonkers, go for it, crazy idea sci-fi, because sci-fi and horror for me, I think one of the reasons why they work so well in anthologies and short form is because you can really play around with these concepts, right? You can really go for something that just a horror anthology works when you've got these short stories that are impactful. But
Hmm.
you see more of those, and you don't see like action anthologies because you really need kind of a 3-act structure for something like a drama or an action to really work. Horror can be a vignette, it can be shorter, and
Yeah.
it can almost work better
Yeah.
in some cases that way. Sci-fi is very similar to that. And so I think these high concept filmmakers and storytellers like Alex Garland, it's a great place to play, and really go for these crazy ideas. And
Yeah.
this one definitely does. Because, boy,
What you say?
And
Given the subject matter of the book and the movie, like, oh, it makes sense that he would want someone to adapt and change and build on what he made, like not just make a copy of it, because like that's the whole premise of the book, is things not remaining the same and becoming things that they're not. And
yeah,
yeah.
I also thought it was really interesting. Garland had said he read the first book, and then
Mhm.
he started working on the
The
script.
second hadn't been out yet.
Yeah. He starts working on the script before the second book comes out, and he even said in one interview he didn't go back and reread the book. He wanted it kind of the dream of reading the book to be his guide. And so that was part of the reason for some of his changes in the story, was that the second and third books in this trilogy of the Southern Reach trilogy hadn't come out yet. So like he wasn't beholden to any of that as well. And I think that's a very artistic way of going about it, but I think also it's taking a big swing by taking this book and saying, I'm going to do this with it, and I'm going to go in this direction, and then just goes for it and gets a studio to back him. Although I did like the trivia piece where one of the producers, Dave Ellison, I think it was, after a test screening didn't go well, he wanted them to change things. He was one of the financiers from Paramount, and he was a financier, and one of the producers, I think it was Rudin, had Final Cut. That was part of his contract, and he backed Garland and was like, "No, we're not changing those things." So we could have had some bad studio interference and change, and boy, oh boy, would that have been a bummer.
Would have been a Love Conquers All Brazil situation.
Oh man!
If you've seen Brazil, I think you guys.
I did. I've done Brazil. I love that movie, and man, you watch the Love Conquers All cut of Brazil, and it's a completely different movie. It just crazy.
Ends early, basically. Yeah, I watched Brazil again a while ago, and it was like, oh right, this is that corner that everyone else stopped at, but the movie kept going. It's like,
but it's because of that, and because they kept going, Brazil becomes what it is. And
it has no meaning other than that. It's just fluff, kind of, in a sense.
Which it easily could have happened here with something there could have been a Hollywood style ending to this that I think, had the money people been about it, they would have done. And look, I understand from a business standpoint, you want it to appeal to your viewers, and this is not a crowd pleaser of a movie. This is not a fan service movie.
It's not a tentpole movie.
No, not at all. This is one of those that I don't like using the phrase like, well, you just don't get it. But like, there are movies that not everybody is going to get. They're not going to latch onto. Again, Lynch, Cronenberg does this.
They just, or they can follow it. They just don't. It doesn't do anything for them. So I get that too. Yeah.
And this definitely falls into that category. I mean, this is going to be one that if you like it, I feel like if you get into this movie, you're going to really like it, because it plays with some themes and some storytelling ideas. There's, like, as I was watching it, I'm like, oh, okay, so she's dealing with the loss of her husband, and kind of how does she cope with that? How does she go through the grief steps? And then you find out, well, there's a little bit of that, but there's also, I love the idea of self-sabotage, self-destruction. There's the line from Dr. Ventris. Ventris. Because, Natalie Portman plays Lena, who's the biologist.
Spoiler warning at this point.
Well, we did.
It's hard to just start peeling this onion bit. Okay. Yeah.
If you made it this far in the movie, it's too late. We're starting the spoilers. So Natalie Portman plays Lena. She is the biologist. She's a doctor, biology at Johns Hopkins. Former military, which I thought was a nice twist too, to have her not only be like the civilian doctor, but also 7 years in the Army. So she has some of that soldier background. And then Jennifer Jason Leigh is Dr. Ventris, who is running whatever this government thing is.
Southern Reach. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mentioned in the movie as the Southern Reach, but the book trilogy is the Southern Reach trilogy. I guess that's
Yeah.
something they go into much more
Well,
detail in.
they in the book they just refer there's no visual indicator of when you have entered Area X in the book.
Mm,
So for this, the introduction to the concept of Area X is the chapter that begins Area X, and then they have the chapter, the Shimmer, when they actually go in, because they just
yeah,
show a physical threshold that they're, but a visual representation of the idea, but it's just translation basically. Yeah.
gotcha. And Dr. Ventress. So we meet Lena, and she's dealing with her husband Oscar Isaac. Kane has been gone for a year, and
Hmm.
she's painting the bedroom one night, and suddenly he
Well,
just
she's
walks into the house.
yeah. Well, importantly,
Uh,
more importantly, it starts with her doing a giving a presentation or a
right, right, right.
class lecture on cancer and cells and what you played at the beginning. 2 became 4, became 8, became yeah. So
Yeah,
that kind of like sets the first domino for like, okay, everything in this like very closely ties into the theme, and it all like promotes the next thing that's coming down the line. So it would be hard to take anything out of this movie without it directly affecting the flow of everything.
oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, the cancer
That's a
thing
good
I think
point.
is just an important showing the cell stuff, because that's a through line throughout the movie as well.
Hmm. Yeah,
But yeah,
but
I
we
don't. We're not
meet
just doing a
her.
scene by scene breakdown of the movie, but
No, that's a good point though. She's teaching about cancer. She's dealing with the loss of her husband, but then he just comes walking into the house while she's there, out of nowhere after 12
Mhm.
months, and her
Yeah,
reaction is just elation, and she runs to him. And I think my note was like, well, that's probably not him, based just on the way he's reacting to her, because he just nothing, just stone faced. Um, and they start having a conversation. He doesn't remember or won't. It's like very cagey with his answers to these questions, which mirrors our first scene with her, where she's being interviewed by Benedict Wong, who
yeah,
I love. Benedict Wong as an actor, he's great, and in this, he's literally just there in like the Tyvek suit, like the hazmat suit,
yeah,
just asking questions. That's all he does in the movie. It's
yeah.
still Benedict Wong, but I just thought that was funny. I saw his name in the
It's
credit. I
but
saw his name and I was like, "Ooh, Benedict Wong." Oh, okay, that's all he's doing. Cool, that's fine.
yeah, but it also it's one of those things where it in the movie, like if you're lights down watching it and then like strapped in for the ride of the movie, you're just taking it as okay, he's asking her these questions. But like from a script standpoint, you're just like, okay, what's the fastest way to get people like boots on the ground into this zone so we can start showing them weird stuff? And it's like,
Yep.
oh, we're literally it's very thinly veiled exposition, but it's also like we're giving you what you need to know effectively, and then now we're off. Like, so they use it very well.
Yeah, and typically exposition dumps bore me, but this is well framed. Uh, in
Yeah,
doing it with question and response, and the fact that she's not really answering any of his questions. So now
she
you're
doesn't
like,
have
wait,
answers,
right? But we don't know that
and
yet.
even
That's the
watching the
best part.
movie, we don't have answers.
Sure, but
Yeah,
it's drawing you
yeah,
in immediately, because you're
yeah.
like, well, why isn't she giving him any answers? Shouldn't she? If this all is supposedly just happened, and so I like that. And then we get the mirror of that with her talking to Kane, sitting at the table, and he's given the same
Yeah.
cagey, vague answers of like, I don't know, and goes to take the drink of the water, and when he sets his glass down,
Mm.
you see the blood on the glass, and then it's just that completely deadpan
Something is
response of
wrong.
like, yeah, I don't feel very well, and cut
Yeah.
to smash cut to the ambulance, and
Very
what.
muted sound too. It's just you're in
Mhm.
that ambulance with them, even though you're seeing it driving down the street. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very yeah. The transitions are very good.
Oh, so good. And again, this is not something that we haven't seen in a sci-fi movie before, right? So as like
Hmm.
science fiction fans, we're sort of trained for, ooh, something happened with this guy, and now we get to find out what it is. Um,
Yeah,
and we sort of do, but not in the way that you're prepared for. Like it definitely,
yeah,
the idea that they were heading for the hospital, and then suddenly the black government vehicles run them off, nearly run them off the road, and just like
Yeah.
grab her out of the thing. Like, again, I'm sort of like, oh, okay, something government related, cool, I'm all for this. But then it takes a turn on us, and instead of diving into what happened to him, we get her meeting Dr. Ventress, psychologist,
Hmm.
and we find out they're going on an expedition into the Shimmer. We get a little background of what the Shimmer is. That's where we learn it's been around for 3 years, which was one I had to back up. I'm like, wait a minute, did I hear that right? Did I hear 3 years? And then we
Which
meet
you
a
figure
couple.
it had only been around 2 years when Kane went in, because he was gone a
Yeah,
year.
right.
So that, yeah. But that also means that there were 11 expeditions, and then they waited a full year before they sent the 12th. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to say because, again, timelines and like the way that they play with the
Yeah.
perception of how much time has passed.
Yeah. Well, like even at the very beginning, which re-watching it for this, it's like one of the first lines in the movie, and you forget about it by the end, but it's like, I remember her saying she was in there for days, maybe weeks, and he's like, "You were gone for 4 months." It was like,
Right.
oh, it's like, so how much of that did we not see? Because we didn't see a lot of it either. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the way they reveal that too is cool, where they talk about the rations and how you only had rations for
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks, but you were gone for 4 months.
Yeah.
Like, what did you eat? Like, that's their first question. How did you survive for 4 months?
Yeah.
And then we get to meet a couple of women that are at the facility. Josie Raddick, played by
Yep.
Tessa Thompson. I love Tessa Thompson in everything. She's just
Yeah.
a joy.
And I believe this was, they had already been in a Thor. No, had they been in a Thor movie together before this? Or Natalie Portman
They
wasn't
had
in
not
Ragnarok.
together.
So
No.
Love and Thunder,
Yeah.
they were back together on screen, which
Yep.
I enjoyed, because seeing the two of them in these drastically different characters was kind of funny. But yeah.
Yes. Yeah, when I watched
Tessa
Love and
Thompson is
Thunder,
great, and her performance in this is so good too.
oh yeah, yeah, she had done Ragnarok before this, but when I'll watch Love and Thunder again, because I'm one of the few people that actually liked that movie, and I'll love seeing the
I thought
two
it was
of them
okay. I
like
thought it was fun.
interact. Yeah. But Tessa
Yeah.
Thompson, and then we meet
Mhm.
Cass Shepard, played by Tuva Novotny.
Yep.
And
Who is married to Alexander Skarsgård.
Oh, really? Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
because
cool.
I was like, what else has she been in? Because you look at the billing for this movie, and I'm like, I know the name, huh? And I was like, she must have been in, and she's been in other stuff. She's not really an American actress, but yeah, she's
Mhm.
Alexander Skarsgård's partner, and she's been in a few other things too. So, but yeah, and
Pretty cool.
she does pretty good in this movie for what she does.
She's got the least to work with, but at the same time, she has some very
Yeah.
important. She has a couple of very important scenes that I do want to get
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
And
So I'm
then the
gonna,
team is.
if I can,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if I could just pin for just a second. So, you were talking about other movies and shows and stuff, giving you like teases and clues of what's going to happen next and whatnot. This movie, again, upon repeat viewings, there is so much information that suggests what is going to take place later and supports it, but it's not like blatantly thrown at your face. For example, there's like a moment where Lena starts like scratching her arm, and she's like, "Oh, it's just a bruise," and like you just move on, you don't even think about it. And then later on, you see she's got someone else's tattoo on her arm.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, something happened. I missed something. Like, okay, so but you go back and watch, and you're like, oh yeah, you're not penalized for not paying attention to them. But if you're looking, there's so many things there that support all of it and move it for. Yeah. So
Yeah.
continue.
So before
I was just, yeah. It's
yeah,
not like
before
they're
I go
dragging you along with no information. But yeah.
Yeah, before I go too much further, the tattoo thing was amazing because I noticed it, right? I'm like, wait a minute, that tattoo, hold on. Now, wait,
Yeah.
she's got the tattoo. That guy's got the tattoo. Where's the tattoo keep coming from? Like, and to the movie's credit, it's one of those situations that I love, which is it brings up something. It makes you ask a bunch of questions and refuses to answer any of them and just makes you like sit with it and formulate. And I love that. And the tattoo also shows up on Gina Rodriguez, who plays Anya,
I
who
think she
is
has it originally. I think it's
she
hers
has it.
originally.
Well, see, that's my
Yeah.
question because
I think she had it before they went in. She had it before they crossed into the Shimmer.
okay, so then did it because there's another person that has it aside from Natalie Portman's character, but I don't want to give away who that is yet. But there was a third arm I
Right.
saw that tattoo on. But she's Anya. She is a paramedic, which I thought was an interesting thing. You've got
Yeah.
like geologist and surveyor, a postdoctorate physicist, a biologist, and a paramedic.
hmm
And like instead of being a soldier, they went with civilian paramedic. I thought was kind of a different way to go about it. Gina Rodriguez also amazing. She's so good in this.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all five of them are just fantastic. It's this really great group dynamic that they have going on here.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
you can sit down to watch this movie with a specific character in mind and try to like push your perspective into that character's more than the others and track them through the entire movie and see their arc and how they grow. It's Lena, Natalie Portman's movie. She's the main
mhm,
character. But like you could tell the story of you can infer some things, but like it you could watch Lena's story, you could watch Shepard's story, you could
yep.
watch Anya's story, and you would get all of the beats, and it would track. It would make sense. So it's not just like they're there to serve Natalie Portman. They're like they all have their own reasons for being there, and they all act them out and have a conclusion. So
And
they all do really
yes,
well with them. Yeah,
they really do. And Shepard, the moments that Shepard has that really stuck with me are there's a moment where they're on the boat and it's just Lena and
hmm
Shepard, and Shepard starts telling Lena, look, everybody here has some issues. Anya's a sober, she's recovered, so she's an addict, and this person has
yeah,
this problem. Like I lost my daughter to cancer, and
hmm
she's basically trying to figure out why is Lena there, and it's the line of nobody would volunteer for this mission whose life is in perfect harmony. And I
yeah,
thought that was really very insightful, but also just a very cool line of like, no, that makes sense. Like nobody is with a nice harmonious life is getting involved in this kind of a thing, and that's an overall theme of the story,
yeah, yeah,
too, which is this idea of self destruction. And
hmm
I had started to talk about there was a scene where Lena is talking to Dr. Ventress, and she asks why her husband volunteered for a suicide mission. And Ventress comes back with like, "You think this is a suicide mission?" And it's that exchange between them where she starts talking about how like not most people don't go on a suicide mission, but they're self-destructive. We all have that in us, right? We smoke, we drink, we
yeah,
gamble, we do these things that are we do these things we know are bad for us, but we do them anyway as a
hmm
form of like
yeah,
what is it? Tessa Thompson's character Josie cuts herself, and she wears long sleeves to hide all the
hmm
scars. And immediately, again, Lena, when she's hearing about this, goes to, "Oh, she tried to take her own life." And Shepard's like, "No, she tried to like feel something. She was, she was. That was why
yeah,
she was cutting herself." Like, it's interesting to think about that. And when I watch it again, to look at Lena's character and how she always goes to that step first. Like that's the first thing she thinks
yeah,
of with a lot of these people, and it's usually not the case.
yeah. Well, I mean, and all of those are things that if you break it down, first of all, like we have no reason to not believe Shepard, and I'm
Mhm.
not saying I don't believe her, but I like that with Anya and with Radek, with Josie, Tessa Thompson's character, she's pointing us in a direction, giving us a little bit of information about them, but not setting down on one side or other of what actually happened. So she's like, oh, well, she's sober, so she must be an addict. Like Josie has scars on her arms. Do you think this is what happened? I think it's the opposite. And it's like, so we don't know. We just know that she has done something for one purpose or another to
Yeah.
herself. And then I think Anya's the same thing. She drinks and or has drug problems or whatever, if she has them, which the movie suggests but doesn't confirm. But also she's a paramedic, so like she's in the business of saving people, and she sees a lot of crazy stuff. So I would imagine you might want to drink after that, and maybe so, but like all of them have like a thing that they're searching, an unanswerable question that they're searching for, and they're not finding it outside of it. So this is kind of a last ditch effort for most of them. So it's not it's not a suicide thing. It's more of, if I'm finding an answer, this is where it'll be. Like Ventress in particular, like I have to know what's in the lighthouse. That's basically what they come from there for her.
And I like too that Shepard brings all this up, and there's never a moral judgment about anybody made either. She's just like, these are the facts. This is what's going on. You know, I'm here because, and Shepard had lost her daughter to leukemia, and it was the tragedy and the trauma of that, and going through that kind of a loss, but also, you know, just everything involved in it. She kind of had that question of like, well, what do I do now? What is my, you know, do I have a purpose anymore? Kind of thing. And so she's searching for that here as well. So everybody's
I can't remember this thing. She mentioned, I can't remember the specific wording, but she mentions that her and her husband aren't together anymore as a result of her child dying as well. So it's like she wasn't her anymore, so she's something else. Which again, that's another thing, is I think all of us have that moment as we grow up where we realize that the life we're living now is not our experience that we had before when we were younger, or, you know, when we were in our 20s or whatever. So like as you grow up, you constantly have these moments of, am I who I was, or am I something else? And if I am, what does that, you know, so that it gets into a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. And the themes of self-destruction and change, and the fact that like change is happening, but change is happening because change happens. And we'll kind of we'll save a little bit of that for like discussing the very end of the movie, but it was interesting.
We haven't really gotten an hour into the movie.
I know, that's the best part. But it's like, it's interesting the way they talk about change in this, because like it's something that I think about quite a bit, is sort of like changing, evolving, mutations, the way that we change throughout our lives. And I also, you know, there's a little bit of that like self-destruction, but also just tearing something down to build it back up type of an idea that can get misinterpreted sometimes. And like there's a way to do something that has a self-destructive nature to it without being self-destructive, if that makes sense. And I feel like this movie sort of wanted to explore a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like wildfires and like regrowth, and like it's part of the cycle. It's part of like, if that didn't happen, then the regrowth wouldn't be what it you know. Also, I feel like it's all. I think some of it gets also into, the more we try to hold on to what we've known, the harder it becomes for us to navigate in the ever changing world around us. So it's like you kind of have to like adapt or get overrun in a sense too. So, which I feel like that was like the threat of the Shimmer or Area X in general, was just like, this is just going to happen. And like she says to Wong, it's like, what did it want? Like, I don't know that it wanted anything. It's like, it just was there. It was just, you're in this place and you can't control it and it's affecting you. So could be a metaphor for a lot of things.
And it seemed to affect each of the 5 characters that were in there in a different way. And like Shepard ends up being the first one to, so actually the first thing that happens, they come upon, so they go inside the Shimmer. And then we smash cut to or not smash cut, but we go through a short dream sequence. And then Lena wakes up in her tent, disoriented, comes outside. First of all, the backgrounds in that first time they're inside the Shimmer are just gorgeous. And it's this rainforesty jungle looking thing. And and she's all disoriented.
Visually,
and they're counting.
Pretty great. Yeah.
Well, and then they find out they've been in there for like days already.
Yeah, well,
And
based on what has been taken out of their rations.
yes. So they figure
So
they've been in there for days, but they don't even remember setting up the camp that they're in. And
mhm.
this is going on. So they have no radios, compasses don't work. They got to sort out what's going on and make their way.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a swampy area too, which at first I'm like, oh, this ain't swamp at all. And then it slowly got to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. What I really like about that scene when they when they wake up, I mean, Natalie Portman's our main character. We wake up with her, obviously.
Yep.
But she comes out, her tent is off in a separate area from everybody else's. So she comes out and she's on her own at first. She
Yeah.
walks up, she sees Anya and Shepard together going through the rations. Josie's off checking the gear and the equipment, which again, you don't know if these people, if they just woke up 10 minutes ago or if they've been awake for a while, but you see
Right.
like the rest of the team. Then you see Ventress wearing like a rain like hoodie or
Poncho.
Yeah. I almost said parka. I was like, that's not the right word. Yeah, she's like wearing a rain parka or poncho, and she's just standing there like observing and listening and taking it in. And it's not until the others talk amongst themselves, have their questions, talk their questions out, resolve it, get their bearings, literally. Shepard's like, you know this, Josie, and then oh, here's the sun, and split the difference. That's south, and then Ventress. Okay, back on mission. So it's like she's just been waiting for them to like, okay, we can keep moving now. They all have their type of their character type, and they all play their role. It's almost like that Mickey Donald Goofy dynamic where it's like if you just stick to these dynamics and put them in a situation, you can have them interact and it will be interesting. And this dynamic of the three almost I want to the four, the five, but almost four character roles, because as I've watched this, I'm like, okay, well, clearly Josie, I feel like there's a certain point where you can accept the Shimmer or what is happening. And the more you fight it, the longer you hold out, which kind of explains why Lena can make it to the lighthouse, whereas everyone else doesn't. And I feel like Shepard and Anya kind of have a mother-daughter-ish relationship going on, because
There's
I feel
a little
like
bit of
Shepard
that.
oversees everybody in a maternal capacity, and she's the paramedic that may have substance issues. She's the first one to get excited about things. She's the first one to speak out about like, I don't think we should do, so she's got like more of a youthful, like, not arrogance, but just like she's just gonna speak her mind. She's gonna say the things. And you really see the impact it has on her when Shepard is gone, because she starts to really spin out of control. So it's funny to see like the dynamics of everybody, and like, oh, they're doing their job and they're asking the questions they're there to ask, but it supports everybody else. And then once they're all together, Ventress is like, pack up, move on, let's go. So
Yeah, she's very much the commander of the trip, and like keep everything on mission, because she is singularly focused on getting to that lighthouse. That's her only reason for going in there. That's all she cares about, is getting that lighthouse. I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. Like Shepard is the mom of the group, and it makes sense that she's the one character we know had a child, lost that child, and is like unsure of who she is anymore, in part because of the loss of that child. But she's like subtly mothering everyone else, Anya being. And I also, thinking about it now, like Anya's the one that when they're all sitting together, it's like, I'm going to go over and try to make friends, and like goes over to talk to Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
It's Anya that initiates that and brings her back over. And it's like, so yeah, that childlike exuberance of everything is really interesting. And then they come upon that house that's like half sinking into the swamp. And start checking that out.
Not the other house.
Yeah. And they start checking it out, and immediately Lena goes towards the flowers and is looking at all these flowers. And that's our first sign of like, okay, this is a weird place beyond just like what they've seen so far, in that it's all these different, what look like different species of flowers on the same root system. And This is one of the few times where they did a legit kind of jump scare, but it's super effective. When Josie goes into the house, she looks around and comes out
Well,
to say
first,
something. Oh, go ahead.
well, when she's walking in, when she's walking in, it's funny because I know you've been playing Baldur's Gate 3. I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3. It's almost funny because it's like if Natalie Portman is the main character and the others are members of her party who are just going to comment things that are relative to their class and their background. It's like you walk up and Natalie Portman's like, hey, wait a minute, this shouldn't be happening. And then Josie's like, oh, it looks like a wedding. And it's like everyone's having their
Yeah.
own little like experience with it. But I like that Josie follows the path of flowers. Like, this is so pretty. It's so nice. And like, continue with where you were going. I think the contrast of where it goes.
Yeah. And so she
You were
walks
talking about
in.
like the lighting and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then when she comes out and she's standing in the doorway and they're like, is there anything in there? She goes, no, there's nothing in here. And she barely gets that sentence out and is just yanked back into the building. And that's the first time we ever have any, and we don't see it. And it's a real quick little kind of mini action sequence where, to their credit, like they go right after, Natalie Portman, everybody except Ventress. Ventress stands there watching. Again, like you were talking about where they were, when they woke up.
She's observing.
And she's observing everything. She's just standing there watching it while the rest of them all get her and get the pack. And we still don't see what's attacking her. So it's just its unseen force. And they get her out and calming her down. Anya goes right into paramedic mode and starts calming her down. And then they hear this huge slamming sound and we see the house bust open and it's a freaking albino alligator that just comes out of that thing.
One.
Huge alligator.
Well, that's what I love about, that's what I was talking about. It doesn't lead you on with things like you see her standing in the doorway, she gets pulled in. Then you see inside, it's partially flooded. You never see anything except for the women in the building. And then they're way off back on the shore. And on a distance, you see it slowly saunter out, lop into the water. And then it's like, this is the thing you're afraid of. It's coming. It's like, but it's like, it doesn't do it. It doesn't lean into the horror tropes for the scare. Like it doesn't need to. It is scary enough, well displayed in daylight. It is. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and then when they finally take the
very
thing,
well done.
Yeah. And when they finally kill it, then it's our first glimpse at a weird animal because they pry, and I love the shot where they pry the mouth open. But they're looking, because we got one image of it where it was coming straight at Lena and she's firing the gun at it and its mouth wide open and you're seeing all the extra teeth. And I was like, oh, that's icky. Like too many teeth in that mouth.
I think my main thought was like, where is the actual throat? Because it just looked solid inside. I was like, where is what? It's like, something's weird with this.
Yeah. And so they're examining it and they start talking about like the rows of teeth. And they're like, well, sharks have teeth like that. And it's like, yeah, you can't crossbreed alligators and sharks.
Species.
Yeah, you can't crossbreed the species like that. And so they continue on and they find a military installation, right? That's the Southern Reach is where they go next, I think. Is that the first place they find?
Yes, that was the original headquarters before. Because it's not till later that they get to the other house because they're at that base camp.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yep. Because they go in there. That's where the pool is. That's where the tower was. Yep.
Yeah. So
they're all together until the end of that location.
Oh, and at this point, the only one that knows about Lena's background with her husband being on a mission into the Shimmer is Ventress. Lena specifically did not tell the other three about her husband being on a mission into the Shimmer. So when they get to that Southern Reach,
they even made a point.
Yeah.
Well, I say they even made a point of like, well, I think she has a moment with Ventress. There's a lot of moments where they answer questions with a question, so as to not give you an answer, but suggest like, especially with Ventress and Lena early on, it's a lot of like, oh, why are you going in? It's like, well, what do you have to do? It's like it's back and forth, but they quickly in the flash forward with Wong, like, so you lied to them, and it's like okay, so he's giving us what we need to know to understand the decision she's making in the moment, and then as you see it play out later on, like it reinforces her truth later in the movie that she tells him that she didn't want to complicate. Yeah. So if you put it in chronological order, I think it still all makes sense, but it's much more interesting in the way it's delivered. Yeah.
But when they get there, they find evidence that there had been a team in there, and it was her husband's team, Kane's team. And
Yes.
they left.
Or the
There was
last expedition. Yeah.
yeah, they were doing guard rotation, whatever. But they find a memory card that was left for them. It says for the ones that come after, or something like that, for the next ones to show up.
For those who follow. Yeah.
And so they look at the video of it, and that video, they're all huddled around a little handy cam watching this video, and it starts off with Oscar Isaac looking at the camera, and like he hasn't slept in about a month, and he's got a knife, and it's this scene where he's got one of the other men in his unit. They've got him like held down in a chair, and they cut open his stomach and peel it back, and
they're in the pool.
Yeah. But
they're in the pool. He's up against the wall of the pool.
Yeah. But they cut him open, and then you see his intestines, his insides are moving like these big it's this weird worm looking thing inside of like this window into his stomach. And of course,
like it's just like passing in front of him. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just this strange little video. And of course, all 5 women that are watching it are just like, I don't want to watch any more of that. There's a quick glance between Lena and Ventress, but later, like shortly after that, they go into the pool and they look, and there's this thing all over the wall, and it is an image that will not leave me for a while. And it's one of the images that we had talked about earlier on, of like that grotesqueness. And it couples with the video of them cutting the guy's stomach, but they walk in, and there's just this Lovecraftian fungus all over the pool wall. And like immediately I'm like, ooh, wait a minute, that was from the video, because you see like the legs of the guy, and it's the pool wall, so you're noticing the background, and it's just this grotesque mutation all over the wall, and up towards the top of it you see like part of his torso and like a skull, and it's just whatever it was just kept mutating and kind of became this weird thing. And it's like, it leaves you with a lot of questions.
You say that, because
go ahead.
The movie has a lot of not direct similarities, but especially as I've watched it more and more, I'm like, there are a lot of elements of this that are very similar to John Carpenter's The Thing. And then so you see these moments and you're like, oh yeah, this kind of looks like the thing they dug up out of the ice with like the head all contorted. And yeah, there's similarities visually to certain things.
Yeah. So they find that, and of course that freaks them all out, and they immediately they want to leave. But Ventress is like, no, we're going to keep going forward, and they stake out that night. They stay that night at the facility, and Lena gets up in the middle of the night because she can't sleep, and there's this repeating motif of her looking through a microscope and watching a cell divide, and one of the cells has the shimmer and the other one doesn't. And
well, they all have been shimmer. They're all in the shimmer. It's just as they split, they become something else. It's each one that splits becomes a new thing, basically.
I guess that's probably more accurate. So, and she goes to talk to Ventress.
They visually represent it with like different colors, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she goes to talk to Ventress, who's like, hey, you're not supposed to relieve me for another few hours. She's like, can't sleep, blah, blah, blah. We get the attack at this point. You hear something off in the distance, and they're looking for it. And you don't see it at first at all. I do like it tore through the fence like a zipper, which I thought was pretty great.
Zipper, yeah. Which you see it before she says that, and you're like, that's accurate. Yeah. No, that's what it looked like.
It does.
Something
absolutely.
blew right through there. Yeah.
And the shepherd comes up asking what's going on, and before there really can be an answer or anything, she's attacked by something big. A bear. Yeah. Is what it looks like. Right. All you see is kind of a big shape.
And Shepherd was the tallest of them, I think. And
I think
this thing came down from above. Mm-hmm. Like it was in front of her, but it like attacked her from above.
Yeah.
So it was like,
and drags her off. Okay. So now,
screaming.
Yeah, screaming. So now they're looking for her. They're trying to find her. They can't. And then we cut to like the next morning, and they go looking some more. And Lena especially is like, I want to go looking for her.
Well, they make the decision. Ventress wants to pack up and move on. Anya thinks they should just leave.
Oh yeah, and go
and
back.
Josie isn't sure. So you start to get this post Shepherd sides and division situation, because without Shepherd there, Anya's kind of reeling and like, well, Lena seems cool, but Lena seems to be with Ventress, so I don't know if I can trust Lena. So that really starts to like split the two of them apart a little bit. And Lena's like, okay, no, but it makes sense that we go this way. Which again, Wong, she's talking to Wong later, and it's like, or BD Wong. I just want to keep calling him Wong because it's the last name. He also plays Wong in Marvel, I know, but still, not BD Wong, Benedict Wong.
Yeah, BD Wong, different Wong.
Yes, yeah, that's Jurassic Park. Anyway,
yep.
But yeah, again, just very quickly, like, so you lied to them. So it's like, even if we believed what she was saying when she told Anya, we know that that's not really, like, she had her mission she was doing. So
yeah.
And in a sense, it's kind of similar to like cheating on someone. Like, I'm going to keep doing this thing, even though I know it's going to hurt people around me.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I don't know. I can fragment this down and find little meanings and all sorts of stuff. So,
but it's one of those, it's a very subtle thing that is her character. That is her, in Lena's character, to do that. So whether it's her husband or these women that she's in this mission with, but they make the decision to keep going forward. Lena convinces the two of them, look, that's going to be the best course of action. But she goes to look for Shepard's body and finds it. She ends up finding Shepard's body all torn up, throat torn out. She's dead. She comes back. Now, Lena's the only one that sees her
face
body.
Was oddly clean.
Yeah.
I always think it was weird that her face is oddly clean. Like, there's a light on it almost. And it's like, but like everything else has been like torn out.
Yeah. Now Lena is the only one to see the body. So, they continue on, and then that night, Lena wakes up to Anya, confronting her, gun pointed at her, and gets cold cocked, and then wakes up tied to a chair with, Josie on one side and Ventress on the other. They're all tied to the chair, and Anya's got them, and she's losing.
There's an important little thing in between there, though. When they first get to that, compound, and they see like the flower structures that look like people, and then Lena starts to get the understanding and idea of what's going on here, is that like everything is changing. Josie comes in and says, like, if you check this, you're going to find like these elements of DNA or whatever that indicate some other, you're going to find human, whatever they are in this. I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah.
But it sets up the idea of like, okay, everything here may not be what it was once or what it should be. And, but then also, before Lena wakes up to Anya, she does her own little blood test again. I think it's like the third one she does in the movie. And that's when she like basically confirms, she's like, oh yeah, this is basically happening to all of us in real time. There's nothing we can do. It's just happening. And she starts to kind of like cry and break down. And then it cuts to her being asleep. So I'm like, I guess she fell back asleep. But it showed Anya earlier looking at her palm. And they do this, it's very... They very clearly move things on the screen. They do the same thing with the like moss and fungal growth in the pool. They do it with a few other things in the movie where you're looking at it and it's almost like you think you see it moving because you're looking at it so long. But it was moving, but it's like it cuts away and you're like, wait, did I just see what I thought I just saw? And it was like, you did, but it was so... And so Anya sees that in her hand, and that's when she starts like, I got to do something about this. And that was right when Lena was looking at her cells again. And so at this point, they've all accepted, like, we're screwed. We're just like, this is done more to us than.
Yep. Yeah. And so Anya has her breakdown, ties them all to the chair. She's doing her thing, when suddenly, while that's going on, and she's threatening everybody, they hear Shepard call for help. Now this this is the horror, like very much the horror elements of this movie get wrapped up into this scene. And I'll tell you what, as far as movie monsters go, this is one of the more creepy freaking movie monsters I've seen in a while. And it's just a bear, but it's a mutated bear that isn't a bear. But it's so well done. But you hear Shepard's voice. Anya runs off to find Shepard, and all you hear is like this loud thumping sound, and then that bear creature comes walking up, and it's got like the skull partially exposed and a little bit deformed.
Yeah, I think it's blinded too because I don't think it can see.
Yeah,
I think it is relying on hearing.
Yeah, and they're still tied to chairs. They're trying, like, they're slowly getting their gags out and everything like that. But the bear, instead of growling like a bear, is vocalizing with Shepard's voice, and that is unsettling as all hell to hear.
Yeah,
Help me,
that
coming out of that damn bear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if you watch I mean, even, I guess I was gonna say if you, but even being a person who has like studied filmmaking, and like when you see how they created the sounds of like the Transformers or the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, it's like, oh, we took a tiger and the sound of my kids swing hitting the fence, or it's like, I don't know, but it's like I can see how they built it, but like to very simply like take a scream of a woman and just slide it into the audio track of a bear growling and just like weave it into it, it's like it's like, it's like very effective.
It's so, like, it's one thing to do sound design and take the sounds of like several different animals and modulate them and mix them up and create a new sort of sound, but there's something about hearing like a human vocalization coming out of a creature that looks like that, that is so unnerving and unsettling. And it's perfect. It's like pitch perfect for what this movie is going for, because it's just another, they're adding another layer onto all of the atmosphere that's been going on in this movie building up. And it's just like the bear is doing its thing. They end up shooting the bear and killing it and get out of there. But now
Josie kills the bear.
Josie kills the bear. That's true. Yes.
That's another thing I find interesting. Early on with the alligator, Anya shoots at it a few times and then has a misfire. So then Natalie Portman comes in and gets the alligator's attention, and soldier profile, they do directly down the barrel into the camera. Very effective. So it's like, okay, she knows how to kill things. She takes care of the alligator. She's tied up, as are Jennifer Jason Leigh and Tessa Thompson, but the bear is like attacking her, and Tessa Thompson is the one that picks the rifle up and kills the bear, which she hasn't shown any aggressive anything this entire movie, really.
Yeah.
And it's very quickly after that her character arc kind of concludes. So it's kind of like she found her moment and then like accepted things, and
yeah. And so the bear had killed Anya and messed up Anya. So Anya's dead. And Ventress gets out of that and it's like, that's it.
Oh, yeah, the bear like ripped her throat out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then Ventress is like, we're going now. In the middle of the night, she didn't care.
Yeah.
She's heading on. And
we can't guarantee that we'll be who we are when we get there if we don't leave now. It's basically like we're changing, we're becoming other things. Yeah.
And then we get that nice moment where, as you said, Josie Raddick gets her character arc kind of comes to completion, where she's sitting there and Lena comes over, sits down next to her.
She's been in jacket and long sleeves the entire movie. She's been the most bundled up person the entire movie, and it cuts to daylight and she's outside in like the shortest sleeved shirt, just completely exposed to the elements basically, and you see all of her scars and you see it was like, oh, okay, this is her. This is actually the first time we're really seeing her.
And Lena comes over, sits down next to her. They start talking, and it's very subtle. You see her arms and all the scars, and then there's just a little bit of color here and there.
Yeah.
And then slowly that color starts to grow a little bit more. And I love that moment, because Josie says, look, Ventress wants to know what it is. You want to fight it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
and she's basically accepting what's going on and accepting the change that's
Yeah.
coming, and just gets up and walks away. And Lena starts to follow her, and she just keeps walking away. And as she's walking away, there's more and more plant life growing out of her. And kind of turns a corner, and Lena comes around the corner, and she's gone. And we have to assume she turned into one of those like human-shaped plants,
There's
basically.
multiple. It's like she turned a corner into like a park, and instead of seeing people playing, they were all just plants, sculptures in people forms. So like one of them is undoubtedly Josie, I assume, but it's like you don't know which one it is.
Yeah. But it's
I
her.
really
Go ahead.
I think probably my singular favorite line delivery in the movie is Tessa Thompson when she's talking to Natalie Portman in that moment, and Natalie Portman says like it's in me, and then Tessa Thompson like confirming, but also like in a sense of relief, just very like casually like it will be in all of us. Like this is a truth. It's not like I'm making an argument. Like this is just she's saying it with such a sound of like this is a resolve of like this. We all have it. This is but I just love that delivery. It's so like
Well, and it's really
also
good
the music
because
in this movie. To cut to the bear scene, there's no music in that scene, and it's the same with the alligator. The music is not there to amp things up. It becomes a very prominent thing in the third act, but that's because there's hardly any dialogue at that point. So the audio and stuff. But I love that it's like you don't need it to make the scene more. You don't need to add the spice and the sauce to it. It's got enough flavor on its own. You just serve it as is.
And it's,
so, Raddick,
Raddick was the character who kind of figured out what was going on inside the Shimmer, inside the perimeter of like, it's like a prism, and it's refracting. It's refracting light. It's refracting sound and DNA, and that DNA refraction is causing all these mutations. And she figures that out, and then she's just accepting of it. She's like, well, this is happening now, and we're inside this, and nothing is going to change what that is, and I don't want to fight it. And I just really liked how, you had the shepherd, who was the mom who wanted to be protective of everybody, and she's the first one to go. And Anya as the addict and as the one that was really connected to Shepard, losing, mentally losing it while inside of here before she lost her nerve and her mind before her body started changing, and ends up dead because of it. So she hadn't really, she had started a little bit of something going on, but before any of that could take her, she's killed. And then you have Raddick,
and it suggested that she didn't really have the coping skills to deal with things before she got there. So being in there without access to any of that, I mean, it would have been very, I think a lesser director would have like had a moment where she pulls a drawer open and sees a bottle and takes a swig of it or something. But then it's like, you don't need that for this movie. Like we don't need to like really shine a light on what it could have. Yeah. So, but I also, if it had been any other character that had been taken earlier that the bear killed, like if it had been Ventress or Lena or Josie that was screaming through the bear's mouth, would Anya have reacted the same way? But because it was Shepard, some of it is stuff I'm tapping into now, but it's there's a lot. There's a whole thing I have on on Anya with, she gets so excited about the boat and motor transportation, and when they get to that house, she sees a plastic chair and table, and she immediately runs over and sits down. And I'm thinking, like, in this whole area where there's all this organic stuff that's constantly changing and mutating and evolving and growing, she finds the one plastic thing that she can hang on to because it is not going to change. I was like, oh, that's a very subtle representation, but like she beams when she sees a plastic table and chair. Maybe she just wanted to sit down. Maybe there's more to it, but I thought that's a very subtle, like, that makes sense for her too. Like, I need something to help me get through this, something not man-made that, I don't know.
Well, and also like at the beginning of the movie, Wong's character asks Lena, what happened to Dr. Raddick? And she's like, I don't know. But then when he asks about Shepard,
literally does not know.
She's like, I don't know. But with Shepard and Anya, she knows they died. And
he asks together. He asks them together,
mm-hmm.
which I also noticed was like, okay. And then he gets to Ventress, which again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what happens to Ventress.
And so at this point, Ventress is already gone, and Lena decides to follow. And we get and this is where Act 3 comes in. And you're right, there's very little dialogue left in the movie. It's so visual.
It's just Lena on her own, basically.
And like that visual of her walking down the beach with those crystal trees is amazing. Yeah. And she finds the lighthouse and she gets there. And then an already weird movie decides to turn it up to like a 12 on the weird scale, because she walks into the lighthouse and there's more of that like growth, but there's growth on the walls, but it's the same color as the walls. Like, it's not like what we've seen before, which was all multicolored and everything. It's all like the same thing. And there's a skeleton like sitting next to the wall that's been burned, and
like a giant blast scar, burn behind it. Yeah. Which also some of that growth is over the burn, which makes me wonder if either that could not burn from the regular phosphorus, or if it grew later, because it does burn later at the end.
Yeah. Huh.
But I don't know.
I didn't notice that. You're right.
Because when you see what happens to Kane, like the fire doesn't hit that. Like, it's still there. It's still clear.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's the burn mark, and then there's a giant hole where at the beginning of the movie you saw this like object shoot into the lighthouse, and then it starts the movie. So now you're seeing what took place from that point now.
Yep. And then a video camera pointed at the corpse against the wall. And so she goes over and turns.
Before we go down that hole, we have to get more information. Yeah.
Yeah, we need a little bit more. And she watches the video, and the video.
Don't worry about
on
that
the
just
camera.
yet. Let's watch this.
Yeah, and then the video on the camera is it's Kane, and he's all disheveled, and he's rambling a little bit, and he's not quite sure what's going on, and he's talking to somebody behind the camera. And at one point, he has the great line of like, "Well, I don't really know if I'm even me anymore. Or are you me? Am I you? Like, what's going on?" And he pulls out a phosphorus grenade
and starts.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, I was gonna say that scene when it starts, it starts like he's stepping back. So like he set the camera, he started it, and he's walking back, and then he's looking at the camera, so you assume like he's talking to whoever he's recording this for. So like you don't know that there's another entity. So he's just like, I used to think I was a man. Now I'm not sure. Am I me or you me? Whatever. And then it's like his gaze like shifts just off to the side, and you realize he's talking to another person, and then pulls the grenade, kills himself, and then the other person that comes into frame is
Kane. It's the version of Kane and he tells it at the very end, right before he pulls the grenade. He says, "If you get out of here, find Lena."
Yeah.
And then he pulls the grenade. It blows up, it blows up and burns him. And then we see the other Kane step around and look back at the camera. And that's where Lena, like, she has a breakdown there.
Freaks out.
And ends up going over by the hole. And I like this because my note on that was like, nope.
She hears
what's
noises
going on,
down there.
Yeah. But it's like, no matter what, with everything else that's happened in this movie to this woman, the last thing, if I were her, that I would be doing is going into the dark hole. But I am not Lena.
I also kind of feel like after everything she's gone through at this point, you're just like, nope, I'm out. I'm going to turn around, walk. Like, you're this far in. You're not going to make it back.
I mean,
you may as well just push forward.
You're not wrong there. Like, it's what do you have to lose? But she goes down.
You have to fight an impulse to like go down there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's this long tunnel, and she gets to the bottom of it, and it opens up into a chamber that's kind of yes, Giger-esque is the perfect way to put it. And Ventress is in there, and this was such a strange thing because Ventress is facing away, and we can just barely see her, but her face, she has there's just skin over where her eyes should be. but
Yeah.
it was, but I wasn't 100% sure that's what I was seeing. It was kind of like what you talked about
Yeah.
earlier with like is that moving or not? And it
Yep.
was, I kept looking at it like, does she not have eyes? What's going on? Has she started mutating? But then when she turns around to look at Lena, she's back to looking just like Ventress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have a talk. There's some very esoteric dialogue here before she basically turns into light and like vomits up a whole bunch of light, I guess would be the way to put it. But like it shoots out of her, and so all these particles in the room, and it's
Yeah.
very like visually, it's
Yeah.
very stunning.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, the music and the score, that's when it really starts to kick in.
Yes.
I don't know the intent of the entity. I don't know, like, again, she doesn't know if it had a want or desire or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
um Ventress talks about how she wanted to understand it and she wanted to like know, like she basically felt that she could only gain by learning more about it, even if it was
Yep.
bad. Like she just wanted to know more. She wanted an answer. Um, and so I think she more quickly embraced it and took it into herself.
Yeah.
Whereas what happened with Kane and what happens with Lena afterwards is less they take it on and it takes them on. So I think Ventress provided an opportunity for it to be like, oh, hey, maybe you can just join with me. But she talks about how it wants to break us down to our lowest base molecules.
Yeah.
And because that's basically where it's doing all of this like mutation anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
there's, I don't know if you watch The Expanse, there's a moment in a later season where basically a very similar thing happens to his spaceship. And it's just literally like mid orbit, just completely dismantled into every rivet and screw and
Oh
bolt.
wow.
It's just like dismantled all at once, and everybody inside dies. But
Mm.
it's but it's very similar to like, I need these parts, I want to use them for something. So it's just taking them at their smallest elements. Yeah. Um,
But
but
yeah,
yeah, so
there's
it turns into this giant glowy thing, and Lena's so captivated by it, and she can't look away from it, and it eventually like pulls a drop of blood out of her skin. Like she doesn't have a cut. It's not like it comes from anywhere. It literally just
yeah.
like comes from, it's not even from her eye. It's just from like the bridge of her nose. Just like a
Mm-hmm.
drop of blood comes out and flies into it. And then it starts to change. And then,
It takes that
yeah, you
cell
continue,
and it
guys.
starts dividing the cell, and the cell divides over and over and over, and it ends up making
Yes.
this
The
the
visual
all
we've seen so many times throughout the movie. Yep.
yep. And it makes this humanoid looking thing out of like metal, which Lena's first response is, shoot it. So she does, which has no effect.
Which is
Um,
cool. Well,
but
no, it has an effect.
oh
All
yeah,
of the
it
bullets
does.
pass through it and just become like these stems that stick out of it, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's true. That did look pretty cool. But she's like, well, that didn't stop it. So she just runs, and she runs back up the tunnel and gets back to the lighthouse. And as soon as she comes out of there, that thing's standing there again. And
Yeah.
then we get this odd, it starts to mimic her and it starts to mirror her.
Yes.
And we see this happen a little bit, and she makes one attack at it with the camera tripod. It hits her and she goes down.
Yeah.
And again, it tries to mirror her, right? Because as she's laying there, it lays down in the mirrored position next to her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they both get up and they keep doing this thing. But then she makes a run for the door, and it closes the door. And it's this weird thing where it's like it's pressing against her. And I couldn't tell if it was trying to
Yeah.
like crush her or what was going on. And she's fighting back, fighting back,
She's,
fighting back.
yeah. It's either, I mean, I feel like it plays both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Either she's between the door and this equal and opposite reaction behind her. And the more she pushes against it, the more it's going to push towards her.
Yeah.
And so she learns to just relax, and it relaxes, and then they both collapse. Or she fights it until the point where she's gasping for air, and she stops pressing because she loses consciousness, and then they both fall back. It may be a
But
learned conscious decision, or it may just be an inevitable. She could not breathe because every time she pushed against it, it pushed back as much. So she wasn't gaining any traction with it until she physically, and it wouldn't know the physical constraints of a body. It just knows,
Right.
it's like you said, it's just reacting to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
To the point
but
where
they
she ends
both
up,
fall on the floor. Yeah.
yeah, and they fall on the floor. They get back up, and they're facing each other, and it starts to change and form, and starts to look like her. But while it's mirroring her movements, she reaches into the pack and pulls out another phosphorus grenade, and is holding it. And so then the entity is mirroring that, and they're both holding it.
Yeah, she's holding it close to herself.
Yeah, and she's holding it close to herself, and then she just pulls the pin and runs, and lets the thing doesn't really know how to react. Now at this point, it looks exactly like her. It's made a copy of her, just like we saw a copy of
it's
Kane.
like comes into form as it's about to blow up. Yeah.
So she pulls the
and
pin.
You can see the horror, and Natalie Portman knows what she's doing, but as she's doing it, just keeps getting more intense and more worse, and it's just like yeah, it just keeps going. Yeah.
So she pulls the pin on that and runs out, and the phosphorus grenade erupts and starts this big chain reaction, and we get this long, drawn out scene of her. Lena runs away, and then she's standing there watching as the lighthouse and the entity inside of it and everything burns. Yeah. And then that's it. Then we cut to, her being like, well, that's what happened to Wong.
Well, she turns around and you see those trees out on the beach start to light up. And so it implies that with the entity in the lighthouse gone,
whatever power source was there,
cleared everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's Wong's basically like, yeah, I mean, we found, did they find her in the lighthouse? She didn't make her way back out. I think they found her. At some point, probably.
I think they found her, but I know he does say they sent a team to the lighthouse, and all that was there was afterwards. Ash. So something that for 3 years nobody's been able to get to and come back. Now he's like, yeah, we just went there. It was ash, and we came back. So effectively, the shimmer and whatever was going on inside of it is all gone, is what we're led to believe here now.
It makes me wonder if other elements, like, I mean, obviously, the biological physics math of, why are these glass trees on the beach? It's like, okay, well, sand melts, makes glass, and it has the structure of trees in its knowledge base, so it's just trying to push out in this. Yeah, okay, so it's trying to make a thing with what is in the space it's making it. So it makes sense that it's glass trees on the beach and it's other things, but it makes me wonder if, like, when they if that team went to the lighthouse at the end, did they see any indication of any of this mutation, or did all of it, because those trees were not just they were mutated sand, but they were a whole other structure. But like the flowers Josie saw early on, would those just fall apart immediately, or would they, like, they don't really get into it because it's the end of the movie, but it's things I'm thinking about now. Like, would they have seen any elements of it afterwards, or did it all have been returned back to normal?
And that's one of the things I like about a good high concept sci-fi like this, is it leaves you these questions that you can think about and explore, but it doesn't have to answer any of them.
Right.
Because we get basically Wong's character of, asking her, okay, here, what happened? Well, what did it want? And I love the response of, like, I don't think it wanted anything. It just made change. Yeah. Like,
was it carbon based?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to test it. I'm sorry.
It's like, I don't have any, and she's a biologist, so she's one of the most capable people to determine some of this stuff. So if she doesn't have answers, nobody's really going to find them. So,
and I'll tell you what this movie reminded me of, and I don't know if the book reminds you of this or not, but there was heavy influence on this, I have to believe, from Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, because it's a very similar story. You mentioned The Thing earlier and some of the imagery, and I got a lot more of Color Out of Space for this entire movie, image-wise and sort of thematically, with this idea of, like, something from out there landed here. And, like, so in this movie, the thing that lands here, it's not malicious. It's not doing this stuff as a means to take over the world. It just That's what it does. Whatever it is
Yeah.
just changes things without any desire for it, without any malicious intent, without any good intent, without any want. It just does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the character that Wong plays and some of the scientists want to figure out, well, why is it doing this? And there is no answer of why. It just does.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's where the character of Josie Raddick figures that out, and which is why she is the one that has the least violent and or traumatic experience inside of there with the way things end for her. She just becomes the plant. She
Mm-hmm.
embraces the fact that this thing is just a force of change. Nothing we do is going to stop that. I don't want to fight whatever is happening. I'm just going to accept what is happening. Whereas, others are fighting it and either meet a violent end or go through whatever the hell it was Lena went through with that alien entity.
Yeah. And Ventress effectively basically gave herself to it because she consumed it and then it consumed her. That was another like cool visual, is basically like she screams this light up into the air and then you see her body slowly, like, not super CGI shrivel, but like it effectively, like, it starts to like look like a puppet almost.
Yeah.
Like just shrinking as like the base elements of her are just spewing out into the atmosphere.
It's a
Yeah,
movie
but
that
yeah.
it's a movie that you really have to experience, and there is a little tack on at the end that I actually do want to let people, like, I don't even want to spoil it at all, because basically
Yeah.
after she talks to the Lomax character, Wong's character, and she asks what happened with her husband,
Yes.
and the Kane that we saw
He's
at
in
the beginning of the
isolation.
movie is
So
in
annoying.
isolation.
Oh, that's earlier.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
he woke back up, effectively, is what happened. So she ends the movie going in to see him.
Oh, as soon as the lighthouse. Yes.
Yeah.
She did save Kane.
So that's something, though, that moment I want people
This
to
Kane.
experience without even hearing. Yeah. And
Oh,
so
yes. It's basically it. You could end the movie at a point, or you could stick around for a little longer to get like a what if. But then, or you could just like, I got what I needed and move. Like, it doesn't change the movie, but you
no,
could lean into it if you wanted to.
but it
And
does,
it's not so
like,
much like a teaser for like the next one. It's just, yeah.
yeah, and this very much is a self-contained story, and I hope, like, even though there were 2 more books in the
Yeah.
trilogy, I want this to be what it is. I want this to exist as this movie, and we don't, like, I
Yeah.
would rather sit here and ask the questions that you and I have, or talk with somebody else about it and find out the questions that they might have about it, rather than somebody trying to then interpret and expand on this. There are certain stories I just
Yeah.
would rather get to stay as their one thing. And I think
Oh, yeah.
because Garland adapted the first book without knowing that it was going to continue on, I think also helps that.
Well, he knew that there were 2 more books coming, but he didn't know what was happening. One of the things I read about in interviews earlier, there was some, because this came out in 2018, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was when Weinstein, Me Too, representation, all of this stuff was really coming to a head in like the media and like across, like, nationally or whatever. So there was some blowback originally about Alex Garland whitewashing the main character of this, because in the second book, which the second book is from Lomax's perspective primarily, he's not even an element of the first book. So it's just funny that Alex Garland makes this book and it's like, okay, I'm going to have Natalie Portman be this person and write this effective movie. And then later in book 2, which I hadn't read when I wrote the movie, they mention that she has Asian heritage. And now when the movie comes out, people are like, oh, you whitewashed. It's like, I literally wrote this before the book was out. Like, I didn't even know. And then he created the Lomax character to, like, for narrative reasons. And it's like, oh yeah, so book 2, we actually kind of like takes off from his story. So funny you did that. Like, I don't know how much he worked with Vandermeer on that stuff. I'm sure he had some insight, obviously beyond just the book, but
Sure.
there were definitely, like, it exists before the other 2 books, and I like it on its own. It's a singular thing.
Yeah.
I don't need to see more of it. I think it would ruin it.
I think so too. I think it would take something away from it. Would be like I just recently this year saw Mulholland Drive for the first time, and that movie blew me away.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want any more. I don't want Lynch to do anything else with Mulholland Drive. Like, just leave it as it is, because I get what I get out of that, and I don't need more of it. There's certain things I just don't need more of,
Right.
but in a good way, and that this is one of them. I think Annihilation is fantastic, absolutely worth seeing. And it's also a testament to what you can do on a smaller budget. This is a $40 million movie, which is not a small budget by any stretch, but it's not a blockbuster. And the visuals in it,
It's not a Marvel movie.
right?
Yeah.
But visually, it's so stunning, and it's art. Like, I'm
and
looking
cohesive.
yeah, and I'm looking at some of the stuff, and I'm just thinking, like, man, I just want like prints of some of these still frames that I could hang on a wall, because they do this great thing with the shimmer, where when they're inside of it, that shimmer is all over the place in just very like small ways. Like the water has a little bit of that shimmer. It almost looks like if you see like a little bit of oil get on some water, like natural oils, and you get that rainbow,
the rainbow
shimmer
effect. Yeah.
But they had like that on the water and that on plant life, and like, again, I got all those parallels to Color Out of Space, where like the color in that story slowly is taking over, the shimmer is slowly taking over, and I really like that. And I think maybe part of it helps that like I really like Color Out of Space as a story. And so
Are you speaking specifically of the movie or the book itself too?
The
story itself.
The story itself, but I really liked the movie.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great adaptation.
I thought the movie was good.
Yeah. And came out the same year.
I feel like this was more effective at delivering those ideas than Color Out of Space might have been. I feel like Color Out of Space was very antagonistic, us versus them in a sense, or at least that's where the characters are taking it from. Whereas this is more of a seeking understanding, not like defense fighting.
Which is great, because it takes the same core concept but looks at it from a different angle, gives you a different perspective on it. Instead of it being, like you said, antagonistic, it's somebody just trying to explore it, and I really like that. So I'm so glad that I finally saw this movie, for sure. Like, this is going up there as one of those movies that, like you said, you can sit back and you can watch every so often. I can see myself rewatching this a lot, because while it does have those horror elements, I like cosmic horror and those horror elements that it's more introspective horror, and it's forcing you to look at things internally that these characters have to look at internally in themselves. And I like that.
Right.
And so, and that's a thing that I think is healthy to do every so often. I don't think you should overdo, but it's like anything, you want to do everything in moderation. But I think that it's good to revisit and do that every so often. And this is a movie that brings that out.
Yeah. And it doesn't just rely on I've noticed, I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day. I've been noticing, I don't know if it's my awareness of it or if it's become more prominent in the last like 5 to 6 years, but it used to be there was like the text and then there was the subtext that kind of plays unspoken underneath it. And you would get more out of a scene if like there was effective subtext going on. Like you knew what was happening between these characters. So what they're saying does not actually translate to what they're feeling, but you get that on the screen. And I feel like recently, and I don't know if this is a symptom of like Save the Cat and all that other stuff, but I feel like so many stories, instead of just front loading exposition of here's why you need to care about this person, they just dump in, oh, this is your cousin, this is your mother, this is your brother. They just want you to bring that relation in with you and then start going down the story. But if we all have different relationships with those connections, those bonds with those people, so it's like, it's not a universality. You can't just, you need to develop the character and tell us why to care about them, not throw things on them that you think we will feel and have a capacity to relate to. And I feel like more recently, I've seen so many movies where it's like, they're literally just giving exposition and like, but that's your brother. Don't you care about him? Yes. But when I had cancer, he didn't this. And, oh, but I have the cure for that. It's like, there's no character. It's literally just wheels of the machine keeping it moving, and I feel like this is like the characters are the wheels. Like they
Yep.
keep in a weird sense, the movie, I mean, it would be different without the characters going in, because obviously it would have just kept expanding. But it's like all of these lives, nobody missed these people outside of the Shimmer. That's why they kind of went in.
Yeah.
So it's like the world around doesn't really change. So now it's become this incident that took place, and we have no answers. And it is what it kind of puts you back into the life situation of like, okay, well, we overcame that. What's the next thing? And
Yeah.
we're not more prepared for the next thing. We just have to keep going, So
Yeah. And that's
I did want to say,
go ahead.
I was going to say just visually, I didn't know about this until recently. So Alex Garland mentioned that one of his influences, at least visually for this movie, is a movie called Stalker, which is an old Russian movie. And I don't remember the guy's name. I'm not going to look it up because my laptop's, I'm going to be typing. But I saw it on Criterion Collection, and I picked it up and I watched it. And it's a similar, a man is bringing two other men into the zone, and there's a specific path you have to follow. Otherwise, like, there are dangers, and there are a lot of interesting visual things in it. It's worth watching to see, but I wouldn't have much expectation. Be like, if you liked the adaptation or if you liked Annihilation, you'll love Stalker, because like there's much less in Stalker than Annihilation gives you for answers or character.
I just looked it up too. It's Andrei Tarkovsky, so that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. It's one of his 3 Russian sci-fis that I think he did. Then Polaris was the other one. That was another big one he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think people had said like Stalker and Solaris were both like, these are sci-fi, but like his style was asking a lot of questions and not really like moving forward with, like, he just brings you to a set and like shows you a thing and asks the question and moves to the next thing. And there were also issues with the production of that film, I guess. So, but anyway, it was an interesting movie. It's worth checking out. I don't know that there's much repeat value in watching it, but it was worth seeing once at least. Yeah.
Hard to say. I mean, I can respect especially a filmmaker that will make you ask questions and then not answer them. So like you ask somebody, I just recently on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob this past season, they had that animated film with what's his name? Shoot. Not Tippett. Whoever he had done. Anyway,
the Mad God.
Yeah. And Joe Bob straight up asks him, what's this movie about? And his answer was, it's about 85 minutes. And I just loved that because he's like, I'm not going to tell you because I don't even know. And like Lynch does that a lot. And again, and Tarkovsky was one too that I've heard about, would do stuff like that. And I can respect that because there's an art to it when it's done well. It can be done really poorly and really like ham-fisted. But when I experience that and it gets pulled off like Annihilation does, I just love it. I love that whole, just kind of set you in a direction, and then you sort of, you get to pick the breadcrumbs and you get to figure it out, and it becomes a very individual experience. So,
and I mean, in a sense, like life, like after a person dies, you can go over their not remain, but you can go over what they left behind, talk to the people that knew them, and like try to piece together an understanding of who this person was and the life, but you're never going to fully know what their experience was like. And so like, we don't fully know anything about the other 4 members of the team. We don't even know much more about Kane. She mentions when she's talking to Ventress before they go in, when she says that she wants to go, she said like, I owe him. And I'm like, okay, is that because they were both soldiers and maybe he saved her life at one point before she left the military to become a professor? Or is it because of the affair situation? Or like, so it's like, or is it because the only possible way to cure him is to find out what caused this, which is a very literal, direct book. But it's just, it's one of those things where it's like the simple way that a thing is said can have like 18 different meanings and like vectors coming at it that color it a certain way. And the more information you do or don't have determines like how you read it, kind of. So it's very open to interpretation, but there's a lot of stuff that very much suggests directions. So yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. This is 100% a movie worth seeing. Thank you for bringing it to me finally and making me watch it. Like, I appreciate that
Yeah.
because I had such a good time watching this and talking about it. It blew my mind
Yeah,
in a
glad
lot
to
of
hear it,
ways.
yeah.
So
It's one of these things where it's become, I'll watch a movie and I'll be like, let me pull up Travis's podcast. Oh, they haven't covered it yet. Okay, hey.
Yeah, no, I'm all about that. Like, I love that kind of stuff because I like finding something new. And
Yeah.
that's why I love doing this show, because it goes both ways. I like showing somebody something for the first time, and I like experiencing something for that first time, and then
Yeah.
discussing it and figuring out, like, well, why did it work? Why didn't it work? What was the thing that you latched onto, or what did, not meet expectations or fall flat? So it's very cool that way.
Yeah.
And this definitely was
Yeah.
one that absolutely worth a watch, and I will be watching it again. So I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think they marketed it as a horror movie, which is good, because I don't think it, like, if this had been an A24 movie, I feel like they would have leaned into the horror element more
Probably
for the marketing. But I mean, it's Paramount and Skyfall, so it's like, or Skydance, not Skyfall. The James Bond is kicking in. But yeah, I think it was just advertised as just like a science fiction movie, and obviously they don't put the big scares on the screen for the trailer. But yeah, I don't really remember. Of course, I had heard about the book before it, so it was kind of like I had already pre-advance purchased my ticket before they existed, because I knew I was going to see it regardless. But
sure.
I didn't need to see an ad campaign. But yeah, it's good. I really enjoy it. I think it's I had a relative that years ago, I told him that I was like in a really, really bad mood. So I watched Requiem for a Dream to cheer me up. And they thought I was joking. And I was like, no, there is something kind of cathartic about when you put yourself through that type of an emotional experience. You kind of get like a sigh of relief afterwards. Like, okay, I can kind of handle like what I'm dealing with. Like, and this is that kind of movie that it doesn't give me the contrasting perspective, but it feels like I guess it's ironic. I feel like I'm back to myself after I've watched it, but the movie suggests that you become something else after. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like when I'm feeling really, this is a good like wipe the slate clean kind of. Okay,
because
get back to it.
It's challenging. It challenges you to look at it and take it in, and then from there you can sort of, you're always changing and evolving, and this sort of lets that come into focus as like, that's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with not being the same person you were 10 years ago, or 6 months ago, even, and allowing you to sort of come back into balance from that. So I kind of like it. It's sort of, I'll tell people a lot that, like, if I'm getting really stressed out or I'm getting upset about something, I'll throw on some like hardcore metal and it'll calm me down. And it's the same idea
almost. And
you can put it into something. So yeah,
well, I feel like that's the thing. It's like, if there was an old Animaniacs, obviously Animaniacs is from the 90s, but there was an episode where Dot was just trying to find some quiet, and she keeps going and going and going from place to place to place. Like, no, there's a cricket. Oh, there's something. There's a wind blowing the grass. She finally gets to like a void, and then she's like, it's too quiet. Like, so I feel like that's the thing. It's like, you think you know what you want, but sometimes it's like better to just like, okay, let me really embrace the noise so that I can appreciate the actual quiet that I'm hearing that I've just gotten used to.
Yep.
Yeah. You need to just run the gears and shift things around a bit, and then
yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being back. It's been a little too long since we had you on, so it was good to get you back on here, and we'll definitely do it again.
Yeah. It's been good, but good to back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a good conversation. And so we'll definitely do this again. Now, if you like the conversation, you want to catch it live, including whatever technical difficulties may or may not arise, you can do that Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time at twitch.tv/TVstravis. You can catch the live show. If live isn't for you or that time doesn't work, it comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. It's youtube.com/@tvstravis, or search for Wait You Haven't Seen on any podcatcher. Or easy way to do it, go right to tvstravis.com, and there's links for all your different podcast sources. There's a searchable list of episodes there. All that fun stuff you can catch right there at tvstravis.com. Next week, I will have a fun one coming up, but it's going to be a surprise. So you're going to have to wait and find out what that is. But we're getting closer and closer. Yeah, nobody knows yet, including me. But we're getting closer to October and the Gore podcast crossover for the month. I am part of a podcast called Gore, where we do all horror movies all the time. And for the month of October, I'm going to bring in my 3 co-hosts from that, and we're going to talk some fun stuff. We've got some great things lined up this year, as always. So definitely stay tuned for that as we're heading into the fall season, and I can't wait. And hopefully this is the last week of like super hot weather, and it can cool down again. But yeah, and also at tvstravis.com there is links to merchandise if you want to get the logo that I have on some stuff. That's always fun. There's also a Patreon for this show, patreon.com/WYHS. You can support the show for as little as $1 an episode. And you get early access to the shows. You get early access to any video content that I might be putting out, and also a monthly movie night with me and other patrons. We call it the Movie Catch-Up Night, where we go through the back catalog of episodes of this show, find something that patrons haven't seen, maybe for whatever reason, and watch it. Because I've done 232 episodes of this show. It's a lot of movies. I don't expect everyone to have seen every single one of them. So that's just a few of the things you can get from Patreon, but definitely check that out. And if you can't do Patreon for whatever reason, that's fine. Just being here listening to it or listening to it on YouTube, wherever, is wonderful. I'm also on all the social medias. Sorry. I'm also on all the social medias as TV's Travis. So you can find me there, including this Twitch channel where I do the show and I play some games and stuff like that as well. So definitely check all that out. But Josh, thank you so much for being here this week. This has been super fun. And we got to figure out when we can do it again. Good chat.
Yeah. Well, I had a movie idea for an October, but then you mentioned that your October is pretty much full. So I was like, okay, maybe we can, I'll chat with you later, but I was like, okay, we can do that later if you haven't seen it, but
sure. No, totally.
I'm not confirming anything, but there's a 6-month-long creative project that starts literally tomorrow that I've signed up for, but I have yet to decide what I'm doing with it. So I'll let you know. I might be doing more Annihilation stuff this week, but I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted.
Definitely do, and I will let all the listening audience know any of that as it unfolds. So once again, thank you so much. We'll get you back sometime soon, and remember,
man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, everybody out there, enjoy your movies. Ask questions. Don't expect answers. It's been fun to see you.
The rhythm of the dividing pair